You are listening to Influencers from the Conference Board.
Hello, my name is JP Kuehlwein. I'm principal at Uber Brands and the leader of the Marketing Institute here at the Conference Board. And I want to welcome you to the second installment of our mini-series, Marketing in Times of COVID-19. I hope you and yours are healthy and safe in these rather challenging times. Today, I will be talking to Dan Fietsam, who is the principal and chief creative officer at the creative shop called The Lotus Coterie, about what and how brands can, should, must, or must not communicate in this COVID-19 crisis. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, JP. I'm honored to be here. I hope I can be of some help.
I'm sure you can. Let me tell you a few things about Dan. He is a veteran when it comes to creative and communication in the ad space. He can look back at 30 years in ad agencies such as BBDO, Leo Burnett, DDB, FCB, all the abbreviations you can think of, working on blue chip clients and brands like the ones of Wrigley's, Mars, Anheuser-Busch, T-Mobile, Frito-Lay, you name it. He has won just about every industry award that you can win across these categories, like the famous Cannes Lions and the Emmys. And his work has appeared everywhere, from your email inbox to the Super Bowl. So he knows his stuff, is what I'm saying. He now is the principal and chief creative officer at the Lotus Coterie, which is an independent creative consultancy. And I'll make sure I'll ask him where this name comes from. I'm not even sure I pronounce it right.
No, you are right. It's great.
I'm good. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And he has written a rather interesting piece on LinkedIn and on his blog, which we'll provide a link to, about COVID-19 and the initial brand communications that we've seen from the big guys, from Coca-Cola via McDonald's to General Mills and so on. And it was really a good piece. And so I thought I'll invite Dan to our show to share his thoughts with our listeners. Dan, thanks again for joining us today. Where are you located right now?
Thank you, JP. I am in the suburbs, the North Shore suburbs of Chicago, which I've been, most of my career I've spent here in the Chicago ad industry, with a little bit of time in Seattle, but mostly here.
Got you. And well, Chicago is a big advertising hub, I guess, next to Madison Avenue / New York. How are you living these days? Suburb sounds already easier than being downtown, is it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have been doing my consultancy for almost 2 years, so I have been, for the most part, operating out of my home office unless I go on premise with clients. So the kind of shift to the staying at home, social distancing hasn't been that dramatic for me, other than the way that the world has been turned upside down. But the working from home and doing Zoom and that kind of stuff, no, I've kind of been doing that already.
Right.
But, it's a whole new world now, but you know what I mean.
In this whole new world, looking at as a kind of informed consumer, has something struck you about the amount of brand communication or the kind of brand communication over the last 2 weeks or so?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm wired to pay attention to the stuff anyway. I'm just kind of a branding and creative nerd at heart. But also, I have a number of clients that, their first call to me is, what do we do? And so, of course, I'm watching what all the brands are doing during a time like this. And you know, we all experience our inboxes being overloaded from every company, you know, probably even companies and brands we haven't dealt with in a while, communicating that, you know, reaching out about the crisis, which, you know, communication is good, but I've been trying to look at it more than just communicating. What are brands saying to people? How are they talking to people? Are they aligned with, you know, what their brand essence is and what their mission is? Or are they just reacting without aligning to that first, you know, just kind of applying some branding fundamentals to communication.
Right. It seems, you know, initially it was okay, but after, like you said, the probably 20th email, it seems that, you know, a lot of brands are thinking of you and working for you, even though you haven't heard from them in 3 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And after a while, you're like, are they thinking more of themselves rather than you? Because they seem to have a need to communicate with you that you do not experience.
Yes.
I want to stay a little bit before we dive into it actually with your background, so we get a good sense. You've been in this industry for a long time. This is not the first crisis. Maybe it's the first crisis of this kind for sure, even though I've lived personally, for example, through SARS quite directly. I was in Singapore at the time working on the Pampers brand in Southeast Asia. But we've all lived through 9/11. We've lived through the financial depression. We've lived through various bubbles, .com and other. Are there pieces in your history as a communication professionals that you now look back to, that you now source from, that are relevant here? Do you have some of those memories ready?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, I was creative director on Sears during 9/11, and you know, while this crisis is its own unique experience for sure, you know, I do remember the time of 9/11. You know, it was the same thing as the world completely changed. Well, that was definitely overnight. This has been a little bit of not a dramatic overnight change, but nonetheless dramatic. The world has changed completely.
Right.
So that reminds me of that crisis. The financial crisis in '08. It didn't seem to there was that affected me more as a manager of an ad agency and having to make adjustments to staffing because of dealing with clients just simply, you know, pulling back in their communications. There was some response, but I would say I do remember going in with Sears, and we ran some newspaper ads as a response a couple days after 9/11. You know, the difference there, though, we didn't have you know, the proliferation of social media now like we do now. So, you know, things didn't happen quite as crisis communication didn't happen quite as fast as it does now. But I guess the thing that I pull from all the experience is just, you know, taking a pause, kind of leaning back into some fundamentals for branding and you know, even just human communication and making sure and helping my clients remember that.
Right.
You know, which is how, you know, the best thing to ask, I think, is, and this is a human being or a brand, is how can we help? You know, what can we do to help the situation? And, you know, as you mentioned in my blog, one of the things maybe to not jump out there with a Me Too or a similar piece of communication like everybody else, and just not add to the noise that's out, the useless noise that's out there.
Right.
So,
And, You're entitled, your piece is altering your brand logo, the best action to take right now, referring to the McDonald's, Audi, Coke, and many others that kind of literally pulled their logos apart to kind of communicate social distancing almost in a public service announcement way.
Right.
Why were you particularly concerned or paying attention to this particular creative move by so many players?
It kind of struck me. I did notice when it first started happening, it caught my eye again, because I pay attention to that stuff. I had a couple of my clients ask me, not that they're at the scale of a McDonald's or a Coca-Cola, if that's something we should look at and do. And, I did not think so. And the reason I don't think that helps anybody is, back to what you said about when these companies are reaching out and it feels more like they're doing it for themselves than they're doing it for you. I think that's the first metric of maybe you shouldn't be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I raise in detail on the blog, kind of like take a step back and say, is that, and look, I didn't mean to go after it as just mere criticism and say you shouldn't be doing that. I meant to use it as, well, let's use it to kind of think about what we could do, right? So start with asking the question, social distancing our logo, is that really the best thing we could be doing right now? And as you read, I did a deep dive into McDonald's saying, there's a lot of things they could be doing. And frankly, is that the best strategic decision a brand can make right now, is to kind of do a clever logo play? It seems kind of tone deaf to me, to tell you the truth.
Right. And I guess the proof of the pudding, and it's important to note here, maybe to say, at least for the American market, and we'll get back to that, was that quite quickly there were quote unquote anti-posts that say, who gives a damn about
Right.
McDonald's, separating its arches? What about them not paying sick leave to all of their workers and shedding
Right.
them almost immediately, and not caring about them?
Yeah.
That's not a good way of distancing. So how if McDonald's was your account, and maybe it's going to be after this podcast or crisis, what would you do next time?
Yeah, that's what you're asking right there is exactly the process, right? So, instead of just being clever with our logo, what are some actions that are aligned with what our brand essence is and what our purpose is? What are actions we could take that are going to help people through the crisis? So McDonald's, for example, maybe we should, if I look at McDonald's, I would imagine their strategic brief to be, an icon of the community. They're everywhere. Their slogan is billions served. How could we actually serve millions in a crisis? How can we serve billions in a crisis that's going to affect millions? That would be the question I would be asking if they were my client. And, first and foremost, how about we take care of our workers? And that will communicate way more than a clever logo play. If we take care of them and give them sick leave, or whatever we need to do to keep them, through this crisis, I think that would probably be more aligned with what the real McDonald's values are. And, furthermore, if you keep going down that path and that question, they have drive-throughs, they have locations. How can those assets be leveraged during this crisis to help out a community, or help out a local area, or help out the workers in that area? Those are the things that I would be asking, rather than just doing kind of a cute logo play that, frankly, I think people that are freaking out about their health or where their next paycheck is going to come, or how to pay them rent, that's more in their mind than, oh, isn't that cute? They told me to social distance, which I'm getting from, as a rule, from the government anyway.
Right. So I'm summarizing here what I hear you say is, look at your brand, look at your product, look at your assets, not only as your product, but also your organization, your locations, your processes, your cultures, your rituals, and see how you can help the situation proactively. Since you're looking at what you are all about, hopefully that ensures to some extent that it's rooted in your brand and your organization, which is always an important thing. And then, if you realize, hey, we're about convenient food, we're about, remote eating and some, or drive-through eating, in some
Yep.
places, delivery eating, there seems to be a lot of green lights going up in terms of what a good fit could be, right?
Oh, yes.
Of course, life's a bit more complicated than that.
Right.
McDonald's only has so many corporate restaurants. A lot of these are franchisees, and they might not want to do what the corporation is doing. But frankly, from a consumer point of view, they don't care about this. They don't know about this. And you never told them either. So you need to kind of navigate through that added complexity. Is that right?
Yeah. No, I think, JP, that was very, very well said. Thank you for the summary. Yes, that's exactly right. I do, and I do recognize the complexity of a global brand, and there's going to be tension and layers between owner operators and the corporate direction. But as you said, the customer doesn't care, nor should they care about that.
Right.
What they care about is can they feed their family? Are they going to be able to pay them rent? Is there somebody in their family going to get sick? That's first and foremost. Those are the things on their mind. So when you like you said, when you have empathy for your audience, one, and then you look at the fundamentals of what your brand is and offers and what assets you have, and how do you amplify those to help them with the things that are present, very present to them right now. That's essentially the framework of how I would approach it if they were my client. I don't think doing that, we would end up with a logo stunt.
Right. However, I would argue you also need to take into account kind of the cultural, social environment. My understanding is actually that this initiative by McDonald's specifically, not Coke and Audi, started in Brazil, and the defenders of the initiative, who say, no, it's actually great for Brazil, say, look, in Brazil, McDonald's is a esteemed institution. Many people might look up to McDonald's more so than they look up to other institutions, like maybe their government, even if it's the city government. And so in terms of communicating to stay, to keep your social distance, they might contribute something very important during a time where even the president of Brazil seems to ignore completely these kind of medical, and scientists' warnings and the recommendation the scientists have to keep the social distancing. To me, that showed that we need to always keep in mind the kind of customer cultural context as well. And, the perspective might be very different if you're in Illinois or you're in India, or in Indonesia.
Yeah, no, that's a again, you're a great point, but it's putting your audience, understanding of your audience and your brand in relevant context. Yeah, you're right. If that works with that dynamic, then maybe that actually is the right action to take.
Right. And social media here is a little tricky because social media knows no boundaries. So somebody in San Francisco picks it up, even if it was meant to be in Brazil, that is an added complexity. Now, you also talk about what some of the brands are doing right. Personally, for example, if we stay with foods, I like the action that Heinz Baked Beans is doing. They are actually distributing free breakfast, if you like, with the baked beans, which I think is quite ingenious because most of these staples have been, sent to the background over the last couple of years, right? So Heinz
Right.
baked beans or Campbell's soups, and now they can come out of the closet literally as heroes that are saving the day. And I think it's if they do it in the right way, it seems to me that's a legitimate way of catching the spotlight again. Do you have some of those examples with some commentary?
Yeah, I agree with you. If it if they do handle it in the right way, and look, it's an art at this point, right? And where look, they're going to benefit from ostensibly an unfortunate situation, but if they can do that with where they actually help people and they're empathetic about that, I think that makes the acceptance of it okay in the culture. But yeah, I'll give you another example. I have two kids in college that live out of state, and U-Haul was offering 30 days of storage for free, which was very in tune with a couple things. One, getting your kids back home, and their housing still goes on at the place where they're staying in college, especially if they live off campus. So you need a place to store their stuff because you want to get them back home, as fast as possible. So they were in tune with what's going on, and B, that's the reason they exist. U-Haul is a place that moves and stores your stuff, and they were doing that, and they were offering it up in tune with what's going on in a crisis and the people that they, their prime prospect of an audience. So, I feel like that's a good example of a brand aligning their action with what they're all about, what the essence of what they're all about, what they offer, but doing it in a really, empathetic and insightful and helpful way.
Right. And actually, it is probably business building, which, as you said, as long as it doesn't come across as profiteering, can
Right.
be quite okay.
Yeah.
I want to get into that a little bit, but first we're going to take a very short break for some quick announcements, and I'll see you on the other side.
Can you, your team, or your company benefit from insights such as the ones provided in this podcast? They are immediately available when you join the Conference Board, a membership-based think tank that delivers trusted insights for what's ahead. Reaching across industries and geographies, we bring together our noted experts, senior executives from the world's largest companies, and nonpartisan practical research to help you address your most important business issues. Our membership packages are tailored to your organization's unique needs and budget. To learn more about our offerings, go to www.conferenceboard.org and click Join on the top bar to connect with one of our product specialists.
Hello and welcome back to our conversation here with Dan Fietsam, who is the Principal and Chief Creative Officer at the Lotus Coterie. And we were just talking about U-Haul providing free storage for college kids. I was saying it's another example, I think, in addition to the Heinz beans, for example, of bringing your brand into relevance, exposing to even what might be an entry point consumer, what your brand is all about and what it can do practically for you, and creating trial because, they're storing the product, but once this COVID crisis is over, the kids might actually rent a little U-Haul van to get it all out of storage, or they might decide to keep a few things there, or at minimum, they will remember the gesture, which is great advertising as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It is always a delicate balance of, brands and businesses, they need to make money. But it is, if the intent is to make money, but also provide some help, I definitely think that that works toward some equity for your brand versus trying to come across as either just attaching to something that you're really not connected to, or you're just trying to take advantage of something. That's probably pretty fundamental. But when crisis hits, I think it's easy to lose your way on that, because everything's been turned upside down.
Right.
But I agree with that. I think you can, it's not the first overt thing you're going to do is let's go out and use the crisis to build brand equity. No, but how can we lean into what our brand is all about, help people through the crisis, and then because of that, we will be relevant and meaningful to people.
Right. You also talk about media buys as action. Can you explain what you mean by that and give an example?
Yeah, this kind of just again, just my observations. We're all at home. The laptops are open. The phones are on. The TVs are on. Way too much cable news right now. But I noticed that the Calm app, the meditation app, was running 15 and 30-second spots that were literally just 15 and 30-second mini meditations, where they just had a very simple picture of a background and said, take the next 15 or 30 seconds to just breathe, kind of sponsored by Calm, which, is a product demo of their product. And but it was brilliant to me because it actually was helping people. You have a little break because everybody's TV is on, I'm sure, and just demoing what their product does. Again, it provides, maybe it provides some relief for somebody watching TV, maybe not. It did for me, but also was demonstrating what the product actually does. I already have it, but I would imagine, that could lead to somebody downloading the app. The other one that I thought was really smart in terms of getting media buy is the masterclass, where you take online learning classes. There's a great one actually with Goodby and Silverstein about advertising, but that was a really smart media buy too, because look, we're all at home. We're going to burn through our Netflix binges and can't watch, 24/7 news. What else can we do? Man, maybe take a master class.
Right.
And especially since all the college kids are in high, everybody's doing online learning now anyway. I just thought that was another smart move.
And actually, if we talk business here, media rates are probably rather going down, because I hear, even though Facebook usage is up incredibly, Facebook ad income, for example, is down. So there might be a good rate or two to be had, depending on which media channel you discover as working for you right now.
Yeah, you're right. I would imagine everything is probably negotiable right now. I have noticed in the last week, even there's been response from advertisers in what they're putting forth as content as well. And again, it seems to be, to me, the more useful content is like what Calm is doing or what Masterclass is doing, versus kind of the email equivalent commercial of "we're here for you."
Right.
I think if you're going to do that, you need to offer something to people.
Right. And incredibly, we're already running out of time, but I want to bring in one more thought that you had in your piece, which was about how a crisis kind of clarifies what you're all about. And there's a part in there that I like because it lines up exactly with what Wolfgang and I say in our book, actually, about great elevated brands, which is it's not about what you say, but it's what you do. We talk about ideas that do, as we talk about kind of marketing. Can you explain to our audience a little bit what you understand by that?
Yeah, no, I think like this is really, to me, and this is the important work I do with my clients of, two things in this. First, a crisis does clarify things. You know, I've been doing this long enough and been through enough that, when the heat gets turned up, you often see what you're really made of. And I know that probably sounds like a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. And it just makes you it makes you take a pause and go, look, what are we really about? Okay. And I think the brands, people, and companies that stop and answer that question first, what are we really about? What is important to us? And then do an action from that place. I think they do better. I think they contribute to the culture better. And I think they do better as a business versus just, we need to say something about the crisis. Well, when it's not lined up to, what the brand is all about, or what's important to them, or what's meaningful to the people that work for the brand, I think it rings hollow. And I think it's just, gets lost in the vapor of everything else. So, I try to not always use a crisis to get to that clarity for a brand, and really push the people that I work with to get to the real, important values of a brand and the people that work for it, to answer those questions first. And then the actions that fall out from that, they have a lot more meaning.
Right.
At least in my experience,
No, I love it. I think we're ending in just the right place, which is, this, I think Scott Galloway, fellow professor at NYU, always says, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste.
Right,
So
yeah.
the crisis can definitely help you figure out who you are, what to do, why you do it. But you should do that anyway and always. So at the latest, use this crisis to do it. If you start with the why and the who you are, then you can be assured that your actions and your communications will be anchored in the kind of authentic reality that, particularly in kind of the social media world we're living in, is so important to kind of back up what brands say about themselves, it seems to me.
Yeah, no, you're 1,000% right. The only little note I'd add to it, because I think it's important. I know, in the last year or 2 years, there's been kind of a trend of purpose marketing, and what you're talking about there and what I'm talking about is a little deeper than a superficial purpose marketing. This is like, really taking a reckoning of who you are and what you offer,
right?
And being authentic to that, and then applying action from that, not attaching yourself to a social cause or a social justice cause that may or may not really be connected to what your brand or your service or your product inherently offers. So I agree with you, but I do think this is helping clarify the real purpose of what you're doing. And I think that brings those actions into clarity right now.
Amen, Dan. And we are at the end of our podcast, and I want to ask you, first of all, to pronounce your shop's name really right? And how can get people in touch with you if they want to? What's the easiest way to do that?
Okay, so yes, you pronounced everything right, and I commend you, including my last name. So the name of the shop is Lotus, Lotus, Coterie, which is Coterie. And, just real quick, that was named after, the lotus flower, which blooms out of, kind of less than ideal environment, like a crappy situation. Some beauty can come out of that. That was the inspiration for that. And the coterie is just a group of like-minded people. So just getting together and working with people that can see beauty in difficult circumstances is kind of who I like to work with. So the best way to get a hold of me is just go to my site, which is lotuscoterie.com, LOTUSCOTERIE.com.
Excellent. And your dear listener, thank you for tuning in. If you found this episode helpful or insightful, then don't be shy. Give us great stars, ratings, reviews. Tell your friends you know the spiel. Subscribe and consider other content that we have. Move over to conference-board.org /podcast, and you can see a ton of different themes that we're covering. Thanks again, Dan, to Chicago, and I'll say goodbye.
Thank you.
All right, auf Wiedersehen.
This has been Influencers from the Conference Board.